Hi, welcome to Conflict Story, where we bring you the best and most fascinating stories just for you. Let's dive right into one of those stories. It begins like this.
Last summer, I found myself in a situation I never could have imagined, defending my ownership of a cherished vacation cabin. It all began when I set off for a weekend escape to my peaceful retreat, a modest two-bedroom cabin nestled deep in the Colorado Rockies. Over the years, it had become my sanctuary, a place where I could find solace amid towering pine trees and serene views of Crystal Lake. I bought the cabin after years of hard work as a middle school science teacher, saving every extra penny from tutoring and summer jobs to afford the down payment. Even now, the mortgage stretched my budget, but every visit reminded me why it was worth it. When I pulled up to the cabin late Friday afternoon, the stresses of everyday life seemed to vanish. The familiar scent of pine and the sound of birds chirping filled the air. Grabbing my duffel bag from the back of my Subaru Outback, I climbed the wooden steps to the porch, already envisioning a weekend of hiking and reading by the fire. That's when I noticed something odd. An unfamiliar black BMW X5 parked on the gravel near the cabin. My stomach churned with unease. Perhaps lost hikers had stopped to rest? But the real shock came as I approached the front door. Pots and pans clattered, voices murmured, and the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed inside. My cabin wasn't empty. Swallowing hard, I tried the door. Unlocked. Taking a deep breath, I opened it cautiously. "Hello?" I called. The noises stopped abruptly. From the kitchen emerged a woman in her late 40s, her platinum blonde hair sculpted into a sharp bob. She glared at me with icy confidence, hands firmly planted on her hips. "Who are you, and what are you doing in my house?" she demanded. Stunned, I responded, "Your house? This is my cabin. I've owned it for years." My voice wavered between confusion and disbelief. The woman who introduced herself as Karen scoffed. "I purchased this place last week. You're the one trespassing, and if you don't leave right now, I'll call the police." Before I could process the absurdity of her claim, a man shuffled into view. He was thin, with a nervous demeanor and wire-framed glasses. Karen addressed him sharply. "Harold, call the cops. This man is trying to break into our new vacation home." I raised my hands in a calming gesture. "There's clearly been a mistake. I have the deed and mortgage paperwork to prove I own this property." Karen's face turned crimson. "Fake documents won't fool me. Harold, now." Harold hesitated, glancing between us. "Maybe we should talk it out first?" Karen cut him off with a shrill command, and he reluctantly dialed 911. Resigned, I took a seat on the porch swing, pulling out my phone to gather evidence of ownership. Mortgage statements, emails from my realtor, and property tax receipts, all quickly at my fingertips. I even texted my realtor to send over a scanned copy of the deed. 15 tense minutes later, the crunch of tires signaled the arrival of the sheriff's deputies. Karen rushed to greet them, spinning an exaggerated tale of a squatter invading her newly acquired vacation home. The deputies turned to me for my side of the story. Calmly, I presented my documentation, walking them through the evidence. Karen's bravado began to falter as the deputies reviewed my paperwork. When asked for her proof of ownership, she stammered something about an online transaction, but had no deed or legitimate documentation. "Ma'am," one deputy said gently but firmly, "it seems you've fallen victim to a rental scam. Scammers often list real properties online and take deposits without authorization." Karen's indignation turned to disbelief. "No, this is our cabin. It must be a mistake." But as the deputies explained the scam and reviewed my records, the reality became unavoidable. Harold stood quietly to the side, his face a mask of quiet mortification. The deputies instructed them to leave. Karen's protest became increasingly incoherent until she finally snapped. "We're not done here. You'll regret this." I watched as they packed their things into the BMW and drove off. Karen's furious face pressed against the window. The deputies assured me they would file a report, and I decided against pressing charges. For now, I just wanted peace and quiet. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I tried to relax on the porch, gazing out at the lake. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last I'd hear from Karen. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rustling leaves and the gentle hum of wind through the pines. For a moment, everything felt serene. But as I sat on the porch with my coffee, replaying the events of the previous day. My unease lingered. Karen's parting words echoed in my mind. "You'll regret this." I didn't doubt her determination to make trouble. By mid-morning, I decided to head into the nearby town of Pine Hollow to pick up supplies and speak with the sheriff's office about securing my property. After yesterday's debacle, I wanted to ensure Karen and Harold wouldn't return unannounced. The drive into town was short, and the quaint streets of Pine Hollow bustled with locals and a few tourists browsing the shops. At the sheriff's station, Deputy Martinez greeted me. He was one of the officers who had been at the cabin the day before. "Morning, Mr. Dawson," he said with a nod. "What can we do for you today?" "I'd like to know if it's possible to file a no trespass order against those people from yesterday," I explained. "I'm worried they'll come back." Deputy Martinez frowned. "It's a smart move. Based on how upset that woman was, I wouldn't be surprised if she tries something. We can file the order and make it clear that any return to your property will result in immediate arrest." Relieved, I filled out the necessary paperwork. Deputy Martinez assured me they'd follow up if anything suspicious happened. I thanked him and headed to the local hardware store to purchase a security camera system. If Karen or Harold showed up again, I wanted proof of their actions. Back at the cabin, I spent the afternoon installing the cameras. One covered the driveway, another overlooked the porch, and a third captured the back entrance. By the time I finished, the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the lake. I felt a bit more secure, but a nagging feeling kept me on edge. That night, around 11 p.m., the sound of a car engine startled me. Peering through the window, I saw headlights cutting through the darkness as a familiar black BMW crept up the driveway. My stomach dropped. It was Karen and Harold. I grabbed my phone and called the sheriff's office. "This is Nathan Dawson," I said quickly. "The trespassers from yesterday are back. They're on my property right now." The dispatcher assured me deputies were on their way. Meanwhile, Karen stepped out of the car, clutching a stack of papers. Harold trailed behind her, looking as though he'd rather be anywhere else. I opened the front door, but stayed on the porch, maintaining a safe distance. "Karen, you need to leave," I said firmly. "You're trespassing." Karen's face twisted with defiance. "Not until you acknowledge that this cabin is legally ours." "Look here." She shoved the papers toward me. "This is a deed proving we own this property." I took a step back, refusing to touch the documents. "I don't need to see whatever fake paperwork you've brought. The sheriff's deputies confirmed yesterday that I'm the legal owner. Now leave before they arrive." "Fake!" she screeched. "How dare you? Harold, tell him!" Harold mumbled something incoherent, his eyes darting nervously. Karen's temper flared further. "We've spent too much money to walk away now. You're the one who's trespassing, and I won't leave until justice is served." Just then, the distant wail of sirens reached our ears. Karen's bravado faltered for a moment, but she quickly doubled down, stomping toward the porch. "This isn't over. I'll have you arrested for stealing our property." "Enough," I said, stepping inside and locking the door. The security cameras captured everything, and I could see her ranting on the monitor while Harold pleaded with her to leave. Minutes later, the deputies arrived, their flashing lights illuminating the dark driveway. Karen's indignant protest carried on as the deputies approached her. "This man is a criminal. Arrest him," she demanded, waving her supposed deed. Deputy Martinez's calm but firm voice cut through her tirade. "Ma'am, we've already established this property belongs to Mr. Dawson. You're trespassing and ignoring a no trespass order. Hand over those papers." Reluctantly, Karen did as asked. The deputy barely glanced at them before shaking his head. "These aren't legitimate. You've altered a document, which is a serious offense. Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back." Karen erupted into screams of protest as the deputies cuffed her. Harold stood frozen, stammering apologies. "I'm sorry," he muttered to me. She thought this would work." I nodded stiffly. "You should go home, Harold. This isn't going to end well for her." The deputies escorted Karen to their patrol car as she shouted promises of revenge. Harold shuffled back to the BMW and drove off without another word. Deputy Martinez returned to the porch. "We'll take it from here, Mr. Dawson. She'll be charged with trespassing and falsifying documents. You shouldn't have to deal with her again." I thanked him and watched as the patrol cars disappeared into the night. Finally, the cabin was quiet again. But as I locked up and double-checked the security system, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen's vendetta was far from over. The week following Karen's dramatic arrest passed quietly. I allowed myself to hope that the ordeal was finally over. Between teaching my summer science workshops and enjoying the peace of my cabin, I tried to push thoughts of Karen and Harold out of my mind. But that peace didn't last. It was a Friday evening, and I had just returned from a long hike through the forest trails. The golden hues of the setting sun filtered through the trees as I approached the cabin, but my sense of tranquility vanished when I noticed a strange SUV parked along the road just beyond my property line. A cold unease prickled the back of my neck. Peering through the trees, I saw two figures standing at the edge of my property. One was Harold, pacing nervously, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets. The other was a tall man in a sharp suit, carrying a leather briefcase. My chest tightened. Who was this? And why was Harold back? Deciding to confront them before they ventured further, I walked out to the edge of the property line. "Harold," I called, my voice sharp. "What are you doing here? You know there's a no trespass order in place." Harold flinched but didn't respond. The man in the suit stepped forward instead, flashing me a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good evening, Mr. Dawson. I'm Alan Turner, attorney representing Karen and Harold Matthews." My stomach sank. "Why is your client sending a lawyer to my property?" Turner opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick stack of papers. "I'm here to inform you that Karen and Harold intend to pursue legal action to claim ownership of this property. According to my clients, they were led to believe they had purchased this cabin in good faith. They have alleged you are unlawfully preventing them from occupying what they believe is their rightful vacation home." My jaw tightened. They're lying. This is my property, and they know it. I have every legal document proving my ownership. The sheriff's deputies confirmed that already. Turner gave a slight shrug. "Perhaps, but the court system will ultimately decide. Until then, I must advise you to refrain from interfering with my clients or preventing them from accessing what they believe to be their property." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "Mr. Turner, your clients broke the law. They trespassed, vandalized my property, and presented forged documents. Karen was arrested for crying out loud. Do you really think they have a case?" Turner's expression didn't waver. "As I said, the courts will decide." Turning to Harold, I asked, "Do you really want to escalate this? This has gone far enough." Harold's gaze dropped to the ground, his discomfort evident, but he remained silent. Clearly, Karen was still the driving force behind this madness. I crossed my arms. "Fine. If Karen wants a court battle, I'll be ready. But until then, you and your lawyer need to leave my property. Now." Turner's smile tightened. "Very well, Mr. Dawson. Consider this your official notification of intent to litigate." He handed me a letter and turned back toward the SUV. Harold followed, casting me a sheepish glance before climbing into the passenger seat. Once they were gone, I read through the letter. It was filled with legal jargon and vague accusations, but it boiled down to one claim. Karen believed she had been scammed into purchasing the property and was now entitled to compensation or ownership. It was absurd, but I knew I had to take it seriously. I spent the next few days consulting with my own attorney, gathering every piece of documentation about the cabin, from my original purchase agreement to property tax receipts. My lawyer, Rebecca Holt, assured me that my case was airtight, but she warned me that Karen's persistence could still drag the process out for months. Meanwhile, I installed additional security measures, including motion sensor lights and extra cameras. If Karen or Harold tried anything else, I'd catch them in the act. The cabin was my safe haven, and I refused to let their antics ruin it. About a week later, I received a call from Deputy Martinez. "Mr. Dawson, I thought you should know Karen's been released on bail. She's still facing charges, but I wouldn't be surprised if she tries something again. Stay alert." I thanked him for the warning and promised to keep an eye out. Sure enough, trouble wasn't far off. Late one night, I was awakened by a loud banging on the front door. Heart pounding, I checked the security monitor and saw Karen standing on the porch, her hair disheveled and her face twisted in fury. Harold lingered by the car, looking as though he'd rather be anywhere else. Grabbing my phone, I dialed 911 and turned on the porch light. Karen's shouting grew louder. "Open this door, Dawson! You can't keep us out forever." "The police are on their way," I called through the door. "You need to leave." "This isn't over," she screamed, pounding on the door again. Moments later, the wail of sirens cut through the night. Karen's expression shifted from anger to panic as the deputies arrived, and she bolted for the car. Harold had already started the engine, but it was too late. The officers blocked their escape, and within minutes, Karen was in handcuffs again. As the patrol cars disappeared into the night, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. Karen's vendetta was relentless, but I was determined to hold my ground. My cabin was more than just a property. It was my sanctuary, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it away. The morning after Karen's second arrest, I found myself struggling to shake the residual tension. Despite her being taken into custody again, I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that her obsession hadn't reached its conclusion. Still, I reminded myself that the law was firmly on my side. Over the next few days, things returned to a tentative normal. I met with my attorney, Rebecca, to finalize our preparations for the lawsuit Karen had initiated. As we reviewed my documents, Rebecca reassured me. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. Her claims are baseless, and the evidence against her is overwhelming. Her words provided some comfort, but the stress of the ordeal lingered. To distract myself, I spent the weekend working on cabin maintenance, repainting the deck and clearing overgrown trails. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was reclaiming my sanctuary. That sense of peace was shattered late Sunday evening. I was sitting by the fireplace with a book when the cabin's motion sensors alerted me to movement outside. Checking the security monitor, I saw headlights bouncing down the gravel driveway. My stomach sank as I recognized the vehicle, Harold's SUV. The car skidded to a stop and Harold stumbled out, waving his arms. "Mr. Dawson, please, I need to talk to you," he shouted. Grabbing my phone, I stepped onto the porch, wary but curious. "What are you doing here, Harold? You know you're not allowed on my property." He stopped short, panting as though he'd run a marathon. I had to warn you. Karen, she's lost it. She's planning something dangerous." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Harold hesitated, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "She's convinced the courts won't rule in her favor. She's talking about burning the cabin down to stop you from having it. She thinks if she can't have it, no one should." For a moment, I was too stunned to speak. Then anger surged through me. "And you're just now telling me this?" I didn't know what to do," Harold stammered. "She's out of control. I tried to stop her, but she won't listen to me. She's been staying at a motel in town, and I think she might come tonight." I didn't waste another second. "Get off my property, Harold. If you care at all about doing the right thing, go to the sheriff and tell them everything." He nodded frantically. "I will, I promise." With that, he hurried back to his SUV and sped away. Adrenaline coursed through me as I locked the doors and dialed the sheriff's office. "This is Nathan Dawson," I said urgently. "I've just received a credible threat that someone intends to commit arson on my property tonight." The dispatcher assured me deputies were on their way. In the meantime, I armed myself with a fire extinguisher and kept watch from the porch, scanning the tree line for any sign of Karen. About an hour later, headlights pierced the darkness. A small sedan crept down the driveway and came to a halt just outside the camera's range. Karen emerged, clutching what looked like a red gas can. My heart pounded as I watched her approach the cabin, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Flipping on the porch light, I stepped outside, phone in hand. "Karen, stop right there," I shouted. She froze, her face contorting with rage. "You don't deserve this cabin, Dawson. It should have been mine," she screamed. "Drop the gas can and get on the ground." "The police are already on their way," I said, my voice steady despite the fear gripping me. Karen hesitated, then took a step forward, her grip on the can tightening. "I'll burn it all down before I let you win." The sound of sirens cut through the night, growing louder. Karen's head snapped toward the driveway as red and blue lights flashed through the trees. She dropped the gas can and bolted toward her car, but it was too late. The deputies blocked her escape, ordering her to the ground. She resisted, thrashing and shouting incoherently, but they subdued her and placed her in handcuffs. One of the deputies approached me as the others secured Karen in the patrol car. "Are you all right, Mr. Dawson?" I nodded, my hands trembling. I think so. Thank you for getting here so quickly." The deputy picked up the gas can, unscrewed the cap, and sniffed it. "This is definitely gasoline." She was serious about carrying out her threat. I swallowed hard, the reality sinking in. "What happens now?" "She'll be facing charges for attempted arson, among other things," he said. "And given her history, I'd say she'll be looking at some serious jail time." As the patrol cars disappeared into the night, taking Karen with them, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was finally over. My cabin was safe, and Karen's reign of chaos had come to an end. The next morning, I received a call from Harold. I, I'm so sorry for everything, he said quietly. I'm filing for divorce. I can't do this anymore. For the first time, I felt a pang of sympathy for the man. I hope things get better for you, Harold, I said sincerely before hanging up. As the days passed, life at the cabin slowly returned to normal. I finished the maintenance projects I'd started and even began planning a small hiking retreat for friends and family. The scars of the ordeal remained, but so did the lessons. Sometimes the peace we fight for becomes even more precious after we've defended it. Sitting on the porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a profound gratitude for my little slice of paradise. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow.